Okay, so it looks like we are live again. Don't know what happened there, but completely lost the feed. This is my first live stream, so you'll have to forgive me. I'm going to have to kind of like, I guess, go through all the bumps and pitfalls of what it is to live stream. So you'll have to kind of bear with me, folks, for those who are either watching now or watching at a later date. So just to bring you up to speed, I've been working on a monochrome concept piece based on an illustration that I did it's a couple of weeks ago now. It's this kind of black and white picture of this kind of dragon, man on a dragon flying through the landscape. And so we're just having a go at recreating this. But as I mentioned before, prior to the crash, I'm going to do this in 2 stages. So I guess this is going to be part 1A. Part 2, it will be later on. Well, I say this evening. I don't know if there are people watching from other parts of the world. It might be the afternoon. It might be the middle of the night. I'm not entirely sure. But the aim is to kind of do this, so if you can bear with me, you'll be able to sort of see the various stages of this painting taking place in real time. So I'm going to continue. So what I was doing is I was just basically starting to kind of block in the landscape, and just putting the using the gradient tool, and really just putting the background in. So I put the sky in, put the background in. I've got it set on a low resolution, so I'm not zapping the CPU. And just creating this background. Now I might just zap this a little bit with the soft brush. Now I think I'm going to start putting some water in there, so I'm going to use the lasso tool, and just so imagine this kind of like ravine. It's a kind of, I don't know, lake, I don't know, maybe it's like wetlands, I don't know. There's some kind of water in there anyway, some kind of reservoir. So I'm going to start basically making the shape. So you can see there, doesn't really matter, it doesn't have to be steady, don't worry about that. I'm just going to make it kind of as if it's kind of coming to the front. I'm going to bring it round and again sort of take it all the way to the background there. Then I'm going to use the gradient tool. I'm going to bring that down like so. I have a few pass-throughs. Command D or Control D, depending on what you're using. You see there we've got the beginnings then of the some kind of water type effect. And what I'm doing is I'm using the smudge tool to really just kind of like smooth that out, drag parts of the kind of the water away, just to kind of create the sense. Now I've done one. I think I'll have another go at that again. So same thing again. I'm just going to, oh, excuse me, let's try that again. There we go. So just kind of creating this sense of, it's receding away. So using a bit of perspective, it's just receding away into the distance. Excuse me. And I might just bump that up a little bit. I'm just make sure that I'm on. Just going to bring that up there. Just making sure that that's kind of on white and not anywhere else. And then I'm going to do a few more pass-throughs again of that. Okay, like so. There we go. So it's kind of, I like putting water in scenes. I think I tend to work a lot, in sort of creating water. It's just an element I quite like. It can kind of add a lot to a scene. I do have a bit of a sort of preference there. I don't know why. I just tend to kind of find, it's either that or waterfalls I tend to kind of put in there. I think just as a preference. Okay, so that's looking nice, shaping up. Excuse me. So, yeah, about ready to start putting a bit more of the foreground in there. Okay, so again, I'm going to use so I tend to kind of be using the same tools, right? So this time I'm going to be using the lasso tool again, and I'm going to, so this is mainly for the foreground. Now this one's going to be a lot darker. So it might be a little bit too dark. I don't want to bring it all the way down. Something like that. Yep. You just want a bit of variation. You don't really want it to be too much the same. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the smudge tool, and I'm going to increase the strength. I want to kind of create, it's almost like sand dunes or something. So I'm just going to start using that and then whipping up. Let me just take that down just a wee bit. This could be grass, it's like long grass or something like that. And then kind of whipping that up. Into the rest of the picture, and I might just increase that's the size of the smudge. And just again, I was saying this earlier in the previous video, just see where your hand takes you. I've mentioned this in previous tutorials before. It's the same thing with when you're using traditional materials like oils. You have a set idea, and then as the painting's progressing, you might make a stroke with your hand over a certain part of the picture, and it's you end up with those happy accidents, right? And it's almost as if, how can I put it? It's not exactly like the painting's doing itself, but you need to kind of you need to be open to things, just seeing what kind of happens, not being so controlling about it. So with with stuff like this, just again play around, right? Don't be afraid to kind of play around, to kind of mess around, and just see where it takes you. I think all your work, if it's going to be inspiring to you, it has to be a little bit of a journey. I think and you'll probably find this as well for those of you who are watching this either now or in the future, as artists, you ever create something that you're really quite happy with, and then you try and recreate it. You never quite get it exactly the same, can you? It doesn't really have that magic. Yeah, that's the only way I can describe it. It doesn't tend to kind of have, whatever it is, that joie de vivre, that life that it has when you're first creating it. Something kind of dies in the process when you try and recreate it again. So, and that, I think a lot of that excuse me, is to do with having a sense of play and allowing for a little bit of chaos to take hold. That chaos gives life. You need control, so it can't be total chaos, but you need to kind of have a sense of allowing chaos to kind of happen, having a sense of play, and that chaos does play a part in it, even though you could sort of argue and say, well, it's me doing it. Again, I don't want to sound too kind of go into the realms of metaphysics, but there is something excuse me, that seems to sort of go on in the creative process. I think probably the same could be said for things like music. I love music, and I remember reading interviews with musicians, when I was younger, and more often than not, they didn't know the interviewer would be asking them questions about the work, and invariably the artist, the musician, didn't really know how they achieved it. They kind of say, "Oh, well, I don't really know," and sometimes it seemed like they were being really difficult. But the truth is that a lot of this stuff is almost like alchemy. You don't quite, things just seem to kind of have a life of their own. So it's like controlled chaos. Right. Okay. And then there's things like you can make a suggestion of rock.